Welcome to Iranistas. I'm Nik Kowsar in Washington, D.C. Saturday night, one of the directors of GEM TV, a TV station that's not approved by the Islamic Republic of Iran, was assassinated in Istanbul.
On Saturday evening, April 29th, 45-year-old Saeed Karimian, founder and chairman of the Persian-language GEM TV company, and his Kuwaiti business partner were shot dead in the Maslak neighborhood of Istanbul while driving. Karimian is said to have died immediately after the masked gunman opened fire on the car. His business partner died later in an area hospital. Turkish police, who are investigating the crime, announced that the car used in the assassination of the two men was subsequently found abandoned and scorched. Karimian, who'd been tried in absentia by Tehran's Revolutionary Court in March, had been sentenced to 6 years in prison for spreading propaganda against the regime in Tehran. GEM TV, which has been criticized by the regime for broadcasting movies and shows that defy Islamic values and accused of spreading Western culture, dubs foreign and Western shows into Persian and broadcasts them into Iran. Mr. Karimian's family claimed that he had received several threats by the regime in Tehran over the past 3 months and was considering leaving Istanbul and returning to London, where the GEM group was initially established. Though it's not clear yet if Mr. Karimian was assassinated by the agents of the Khomeiniist regime, many are speculating, as it does follow the pattern of previous scores of assassinations. Since 1979, the Khomeiniist regime in Iran has persistently ignored its obligations under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and its own constitution by methodically assassinating political dissidents outside Iran. The regime's campaign of terror on members of the Iranian opposition can be traced to almost 20 countries throughout the world. From neighboring Pakistan and Iraq to France, the Philippines, Germany, Austria, Italy, Spain, and the United States, to name a few, these mafia-like hits are well-known intimidation tactics. A message to all Iranians seeking refuge in foreign lands that the long arm of the regime is not hampered by national boundaries. The international community has slowly begun to hold the Khomeiniist regime accountable for its acts of violence on foreign soil. Since 1979, at least 20 officials, agents and proxies of the regime have been tried and convicted of involvement in the orchestrated killings of Iranian dissidents and others abroad. To date, none of these high-ranking officials have been brought to justice. However, the 1993 to 1997 trial surrounding the assassination of the 4 Iranian Kurdish dissidents in a Berlin restaurant exposed the Khomeiniist regime's modus operandi and subjected the regime's high-ranking officials and criminal masterminds to in-depth investigation. What it exposed was that the regime's campaign of killing not only violates the criminal laws of the jurisdictions where the assassinations occurred, but the hand-in-glove complicity of various agencies of the Khomeiniist regime in these sweeping and methodical murders. Eyewitness testimony and evidence compiled by various intelligence agencies around the world exposed a chain of command linking the father of the revolution, Ayatollah Khomeini, and his successor, the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, to the agents who were charged with the actual commission of these crimes. At the center of this operation were members of the Special Affairs Council appointed by the Supreme Leader to spearhead the campaign to stifle political opposition abroad, the regime's Ministry of Security and Intelligence, and the Revolutionary Guard's Quds Force. Agents employed by the Ministry of Intelligence and the Quds Force were charged with the overall planning and implementation of these assassinations. From the first assassination outside Iran in December of 1979, high-ranking officials in Tehran have proven their determination in pursuing and eliminating those who oppose the Khomeiniist regime wherever they may be. Although a definitive list of all the victims claimed does not exist, approximately 200 cases are estimated where exiled opponents of the regime were murdered in circumstances where the involvement of the regime agents were either explicit or strongly suspected.
Plagiarism has a long history in Iran, and many poets through history have stealthily lifted each other's verses without giving credit where credit's due. And it took many centuries for writers and researchers to uncover who had robbed who from among the authentic Iranian dead poets. In the age of internet, however, it takes a simple software to fact check and find the source of any material that would have gone without proper notation. This happened in 2013 when young citizen journalists found out that Hassan Rouhani had pinched at least 2 paragraphs of an Afghan scholar book to include in the first page of his PhD thesis abstract. Rouhani had originally claimed that he had received a PhD from a university in London in 1980, but that was not true. So at that point in time, when he ran for office in the first post-revolution parliamentary election, he lied to both the electoral body and the electorate. Since 1980, Hassan Rouhani has been called Dr. Rouhani. But when he became the head of the Presidential Strategic Research Center, he needed a real PhD because he was getting paid as a PhD holder. This could have turned out to be a bit of a conundrum for him, so he decided to register at a smaller university in Scotland. However, he never attended because at the very same time he was the head of the Supreme National Security Council, the Vice Speaker of the Parliament, and also an MP, all while still heading up to the Presidential Strategic Research Center. He received his degree in 1999, and that is the only record of his presence at Caledonian Glasgow University. In 2013, when he decided to run for president, many started looking into his past and found out that his claim of being a PhD holder already back in '79 was false. But then there were lots of questions about a Caledonian Glasgow graduate who needed an interpreter to talk to English-speaking diplomats. So when in 2013, journalists and citizen journalists started investigating his case, Hassan Rouhani asked Caledonian Glasgow to block the public access to his thesis. Though a group of students were able to obtain a copy of that thesis from the Khomeini regime's Ministry of Higher Education in Tehran, so far they have published 21 pages of his thesis. And in just these pages, there are lots of signs of plagiarism. A former employee of the Presidential Strategic Center told me that in the late 90s, a group of experts at the center were responsible for writing a thesis for Mr. Rouhani. After reaching the nuclear deal, the Islamic Republic started negotiating with Boeing and Airbus and other aerospatial companies to purchase aircraft for its airlines, such as Iran Air and Mahan Air. But there is some resistance in Washington to the deal that was made recently between Boeing and the Islamic Republic. Last week, Peter Kohanloo of the Iranian American majority wrote an op-ed about blocking the deal between Iran and Boeing. We have Peter Kohanloo today on Iranistas, and I would love to know his idea behind his op-ed.
There are several reasons to oppose the Boeing deal with Iran's regime. One of the major reasons was that there have been accusations that the Iranian regime, specifically the Revolutionary Guards, have been using passenger airplanes to ferry weapons and materials to Iran's client, the Assad regime, to wage war on civilians. And that was one of the major concerns. Individuals like Senator Rubio of Florida, Representative Roscom of Illinois, made a persuasive case on those grounds. And my major concern was that if this Boeing-Iran deal goes through and the Trump administration allows it to go through, that will be the start of a gold rush of American business to Iran. And the concern is that once you open the floodgates for business to Iran with American companies, what happens is that those corporations, firms, different entities will want to protect their interests with the Iranian regime. And therefore, they will help create or strengthen a pro-Iranian regime lobby in DC. Once that happens, it will be very difficult for members of Congress, particularly those coming from districts or states where there's a big demand for job creation. What happens is that, for example, if you're a congressman and Boeing is in your district, or you're a senator and Boeing is based in your state and has employs, several thousands of people, what happens is now you're worried about your reelection. You're worried about, how am I going to get the votes? How am I going to get the money to run my reelection campaign? And so therefore it becomes very, very difficult to oppose the regime, on human rights abuses, on its support for terrorism, on its ballistic and nuclear programs. So that's why I think it has to be nipped in the bud right away instead of allowing this trend to continue.
There is a big question here. U.S. military is a big customer of Boeing, and at the same time, Iranian airlines have been actually transferring arms and militants to Syria. So the question is, how could Boeing be working for both sides at the very same time?
Well, exactly. Boeing is a large, well-respected American company, and they've been doing business with the U.S. government for decades, especially in defense. And so, a company that markets itself as a true American company and providing for the defenses of the country, and with the image that they have this image of being a patriotic company and a truly American company, it's a little disturbing that they would be willing to jump the gun on this deal. I know there are billions of dollars at stake, but we also have a regime that was implicated in, directly or indirectly, in hundreds of American soldiers' deaths in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, especially with those IED explosives. And you have a regime that sponsors Hezbollah, which has killed scores of servicemen, Marines. So I think it's a little disturbing that, on the one hand, they want to say we are, an American company that believes in American values, yet they're willing to rush to do business, and they forget that aspect of their identity to make that money that they want from Iran's government.
You wrote this op-ed basically as an activist and somebody involved in Iranian American issues. How is your nonprofit going to act in the future regarding businesses with the Islamic Republic of Iran?
Right. Well, I don't know if the viewers know, IAM stands for Iranian American Majority, our 501c3 nonprofit organization. And yes, we have relationships with different offices. We also speak to those offices that were involved in trying to block this deal. So we're in contact with them, and we're willing to hear them out and have them hear our voice and our views, and to see where we can cooperate on these issues. Because, on the surface, this looks like a win-win situation. You have American jobs being created, from the deal. And the Iranian side can say, look, our planes are a little old now, and people want to fly in a convenient manner. But really, it could be the beginning of this gold rush, as I was saying, creating a formidable pro-regime lobby that activists and organizations like ours will have a very, very difficult time to counter it. And my fear is that our voice will be almost extinguished in this kind of situation, because, like I said, you would have senators, congressmen whose district states depend on job creation, and it would be very difficult for them to stand in the way of business between those companies in their states and the Iranian regime.
Your nonprofit deals with human rights issues in Iran as well. I would love to know that what's your idea about the impact of the Iran deal on human rights in Iran, and how would American businesses look at this deal regarding human rights?
I mean, we've already seen since the announcement of the nuclear deal hundreds of executions in Iran. The human rights situation has deteriorated instead of improved. We still have political prisoners rotting away in prison. We also have major former regime figures who are still in prison, and they have not been released. So I just think that what we see now is only the beginning, and something worse is on the horizon if this deal goes through. And it's not an exaggeration to say this. I really believe that, for the sake of American interests, for the sake of the Iranian people, I believe this deal should be blocked.